Okay, so I do have some bias towards this, right? Like I have a heavy bias because since the very beginning, right, when I first heard that James Gunn was doing Superman, I was I was struck by like lightning. I was completely petrified. I hated it. It was the worst. It was the worst thing I have ever heard in my life. Like I still remember vividly that time too. I was online and then it's like James Gunn is being directing the new DC universe and I think he was getting Superman. I was just like, wow, I was completely and utterly depressed, right? Which is, that is my aptitude. Like that's how I feel. I'm not gonna lie to you and pretend to you that I don't have a extremely incredibly hard bias against that. And I did, but there's a part of me also that's very like I have to be very honest and especially in the form of art that I'm watching. So I have to legitimately tell you if something is correct or not artistically, right? Or look at the pieces without having that bias. So obviously, like when James Gunn was gonna produce Superman, I would still have to judge it by those metrics. Again, I'm not just gonna tell you that it's like bad because of James Gunn, but so I still have to give it a chance. But from that statement, right, from all of that, I still had I'm pretty certain, I was very certain of what was gonna happen, and obviously that came to be right. All my notions about that became absolutely true when they hired James Gunn, right? What was the idea behind hiring James Gunn, right? When they hired James Gunn was because they want the same thing that the Marvel Universe has, right? They want a certain stability to the DC universe of movies. They want to be able to have Batman, Superman interacting with Aquaman and bringing out comfy movies that the audience would be like, all right, this was sort of okay, this was fine, this was great. Almost like the last 90 Marvel movies, right? Which are all, you can't differentiate any one of them, right? They're all the same thing. There's nothing interesting, and it's just the same movements over and over. But for the modern audience, you can kind of feed that kind of slop. Like you can just kind of give it the same thing over and over, and they would just accept it blindly. You can give them just content to be consumed if it's within that level of normalcy where there's not that much difference, right? When there's nothing like truly controversial. You can gotta get away with those films. That's what a lot of them like the last 90 projects from Marvel are all the same thing. Why? Because it's sort of a content that's comfy, and nowadays comfy means that it's good for people. Like I think the way that the modern audiences looks at movies and films have been completely destroyed over the last 15 years, right? Like you kind of have seen if you're able to produce the same Marvel movie every 2 months or every 30 seconds, there's a very big problem if your audience telling you that that's good, and that's the problem where we're at. So when it came down to Superman in this universe, the fact that they gave it to James Gunn was under that idea, right? It was under the idea that you're basically going to have a project that's very comfy and it's going to be sort of acceptable. Nobody out here is thinking that James Gunn is going to win an Oscar. Nobody out here is looking at it like something new and interesting like Christopher Nolan's, let's say, The Dark Knight. You're not thinking of anything of that kind of quality of project when you consume his content. And I do mean consume his content because by now it's like you're not watching a film that it's artistically driven as more as something that is like meant to be consumed like sometimes even thoughtlessly nowadays, right? I like the what's it called, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I like the first one. I like the second one. When I saw the scene right where John Doe died, right at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, that made me tear. I was just like, wow, this was really good. But besides that, everything else seems repetitive, right? It's like a repetition. He did the same thing where he did the Suicide Squad, which was a repetition of techniques without ever doing something more interesting. And a lot of directors have their own flavor, right, and things like that. But in James Gunn, he's very shallow, so you end up just like, okay, here is the action musical scene that you've seen 30 times. Oh, it's a classical. It's not that interesting, right? You're not there just being floored by it. Like in this movie, in Superman, you have the same thing, right? I think it was Mr. Terrific. He's with Lois Lane, and they're having their little action musical scene where he plays a song, and then the characters are doing something that seems sort of clever. And it's the kind of scene that you've seen so many times, and by now it's just completely boring and obvious, right? So James Gunn was given this entire production and Superman because of this, because you were to do something that was sort of consumable and content, and try to get a comforting feeling, because this universe has gone through a bunch of ups and downs, right? when you had Snyder, which we did really great, but the people wanted to have more of that happiness that you have from the Marvel universe. So then then the DC production was like, now we have to change Snyder because we want what Marvel has. We want that kind of more younger audience too, and nothing sort of that intellectual. I think the intellectuality of Snyder is really what separates everything, right? Like people were offended by how good his movies were, that they feel offended by them. So that's where we are with James Gunn, right? I felt like he was just gonna give me something that I already knew was coming, something that was not gonna have depth, that was just gonna be consumable and like sort of happy. Like, you're expecting what you expect when you have a director like this. And James Gunn is sort of that director, right? It's not a director that expect me to give me something new and interesting when it comes to filmmaking. Not something that's gonna truly deep within the human complexities. Not something that's gonna watch a scene and try to evolve it into something grander and more ambitious, and more ambitious. Something that would look at a project like Superman and say, "Wow, I have to create something truly magnificent that can stand the time as something of a piece of art, right? Something that can stand right there next to the Mona Lisa." It's not going to be something like The Dark Knight, right? Because when Christopher Nolan tried to make The Dark Knight, he understood what he was trying to make, right? Something grander, something more ambitious, something more beautiful. Same thing with Snyder. He wanted to something that was transgressive, something that truly transcended not only the regular comic realm and into films and deeper than that. They all had these hyper visions when it comes to DC. That's why DC projects are so great, and you kind of love them, right? Like you have something that's greater than itself, something big, and that's what makes these films really great, especially DC. Like you can say that some Marvel movies have touched upon that. Let's say like maybe Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and maybe one or two of the X-Men movies, and some of it, and I think Avengers 1 and like Infinity War kind of touch a little bit upon that. But overall, the movies have all the Marvel movies are always just like, we're gonna have fun, and this is just a movie. It's not something meant to be exceptionally out there. So this is where we are with James Gunn, right? So all right, let's get to the movie in itself. So when we're talking about Superman, right? I think the where I wanted to start it off is actually at the intro. And we're gonna talk about this big intro, because this big intro kind of sets up the stage for the rest of the movie, and it's about it pretty much has the entire flow and philosophy of the film and what it's meant to be and all these ideas. Like everything's kind of sort of right there in the very beginning of the intro. Let's say we can say that the intro is from like when Superman first shows up in the snow to all the way to the part where Superman gets defeated by his first villain called the Hammer of Baravia, which happens to be Ultraman. So as the film starts, right, what I want to get you from this movie, right, I want you to understand that you're going to start seeing as we move along, is that the failure of James Gunn is that he doesn't have depth as a director, right? He's not capable of doing a lot more with something. It's almost like shock value of ideas. It's something that like you're going to look at it and it's like, oh, wow, remember that scene? But there's nothing else surrounding that, or it's very empty. And this is something that you're going to see almost every single scene on this movie. And we're going to walk through it, and you're going to see kind of see the trick that he's trying to pull. And it's basically that this movie is a TikTok film, right? This movie, you have to treat it as that. And by TikTok, it means that you're going to look at a reel, you're going to find the idea that's presented, and you're going to move on to the next one. And you kind of want to do it fast. You're sort of consuming content. And you're going to consume so much of it that eventually you're going to say, well, I kind of had a good time, right? I looked at a bunch of TikTok reels, and it was kind of interesting, so I kind of have a good time. But because of how much content he threw out at you and how much different things he tried to throw at you. Because that's how he's trying to capture you. One of the things that this Superman film had to be like, this Superman film had to be 100% liked, because so much rested upon it, right? You were given a perspective from, let's say, the Snyder universe and everything that it stood for, the kind of filmmaking, the kind of grandness, the kind of philosophy, all of that. And you said, well, we don't think that was correct, so this movie has to be the opposite, and everything on that is going to achieve us the greatness that we wanted. Clearly, that was nowhere to go, since the movie did not succeed in any of the metrics that the original Snyder films made. So this movie was pretty much a big failure. But we continue on it, right? So the movie had to be like, and James Gunn understood that. So James Gunn's thought process in Superman was basic. let me see if I can give them so much from each angle that they can't walk away without saying that is good. And let's make sure everything's fast so they don't stay too long in a scene, and they can just say that it was sort of good, right? So you get the process almost like a TikTok reel, which is like, attract their attention and then move on. And he did this throughout the entire film at every single time. And every single scene, every single collection of scenes actually is that philosophy. Let me give you something and then move on. The movie's not made so you stay there in a scene and have a thoughtful interaction and thoughtful vision and sit there and wonder and have those kind of gigantic moments like you did, let's say, Man of Steel, right? Where Superman is flying and you're consumed by the atmosphere, the feeling, the aura, the soul. None of that. You're not like, that's not the goal. The goal in here is basically TikTok. Come on, do a scene, make sure that there's something clever to it, and then the next one. So when Superman is first introduced, we see him like crash landing into the snow in Antarctica, or I think it's Antarctica, right? That's where the Fortress of Solitude is. And then as soon as he crash lands, you hear that this is the first time that Superman has lost the battle. And then you see, here comes Krypto, start jumping on him, and it's, that's not a bad idea, right? When it comes to filmmaking, because I mean, it makes it feel also a little bit different, right? To have Krypto, I think the Krypto idea was sort of interesting in some aspects. Obviously, it doesn't add anything to something, I think, more drama level, because in its very essence, dogs are not something that are deep, right? They're very comforting, and they can be deep in some situations, but when it comes to, let's say, a film made by James Gunn, like, the dog is just going to be something playful and like more of like, quirky little things here and there, right? It doesn't add much to the drama or the experience. I mean, he did it sometimes, I guess, with Krypto. Sometimes he was able to touch upon some subjects that were interesting, like the fact you had to save him. Even if he's a dumb dog or these ideas, you still have to have Superman be this sort of kindness that goes after the dog, which is kind of cute and interesting, I'm not saying that James Gunn was completely bad about everything, but, the levels of things that he touched upon can be very shallow. So we have Krypto, he's jumping on Superman, he's having fun, he's doing all this stuff. And the scene, after that, he's like, Krypto, take me home, right? And then he slides him up. So you can just take that scene, right? The scene, which is, it's not a super bad scene. It's not a bad scene, to be honest. It's just a scene, it has a little cleverness to it, right? So you look at the scene, you'd notice that it's clever. It's like, take me home, Krypto. And then he slides him to the next aspect. And then the next TikTok reel is the Fortress of Solitude rising from the ashes, right? And you kind of see the visuals and it looks kind of cool. Then you see the big door with the Superman S. And that's the end of that reel. Let's come to the next one. In the next one, he's going to talk about the robots. He's just meeting the robots. He's going to get, the robots, right, in the Superman, the Fortress of Solitude are going to heal him up so he can go back to the fight. So they have some little banter. The robots put him in the chair, and in the chair, Superman, they hit him with sunlight. That sunlight heals him, and Superman is in pain and all the stuff. So from all the scenes, you can kind of see what's the actions that James Gunn wants to be played out, right? Like, first of all, he wants to grab your attention like kind of quickly. He wants to be liked right at the beginning of the film, right? This is not like one of those Superman movies where it has to be thoughtful, like, let's say in Man of Steel, where you sit there, it's like you see the birth of a child and there's music. Although Zack Snyder did almost the same thing where he tried to grab your attention very early with the destruction of Krypton, and there's a lot to it. In there, I think there's more moving pieces, right? Because sometimes you get into politics, sometimes you get into the idea of what is a child's birth. You have a lot of pieces. Well, in James Gunn, it's most of it's like, look at this scene, look what it does, and we go on to the next one. Now you see that Superman has some robots, they have some clever banter. Cool. In this one, you see that Superman has a dog, he jumps on you. Cool. You get me? There's a certain, there's more stuff, there's more complexity in another sort of film than it is in this. So it makes, everything kind of more simpler. But there's nothing there to consume after that, right? It feels sort of empty. Like, sure, we get that he had some conversation for the robots, and, Krypto jumped on him, but it's not like you kind of want to rewind that whole scene of introduction and be like, wow, let's watch all of that again. You get me? Like, I don't think I could imagine myself being like, wow, we just saw Superman landing in the snow, getting healed, and let me rewind all of that and watch it again. Isn't that something, let's say Man of Steel, right? You go, watch the birth, get filled by its ambience, the cinematography, the music, the questions and play, and all of that, because there's so much more and it's more complex, allows you to think and stay there longer. This feels like a film or like a book, right? While the other one feels like something like this trying to show you ideas just so you can kind of like it. And that's fine, right? It's two different philosophical ideas of making a film. One of them doesn't want to do. You don't have to be some hyper intellectual like in Man of Steel to admire a movie that doesn't want to do that, like James Gunn. That doesn't mean that what James Gunn did is wrong, but this is the style that he's trying to produce. So you do end up with a lot of stuff that it's a bit more shallow in its way of execution, right? Like all of that scene, it's a bit more shallow. It's just its intention. It's not meant to be deeper than that. After that, Superman flies to Metropolis, and I think that we go to the second part. And this sequence of events kind of skips, but it's about the same thing, right? Superman has to travel back to Metropolis to fight the Hammer of Boravia, the villain that just beat him, and that villain is being controlled by Lex Luthor. And because Lex Luthor, I guess, controls the villain. So when Lex Luthor is in Luthor Tower, and he calls out. He controls the villain by calling out moves, right? If he says B6, the villain does a move and he attacks Superman. Okay, so going into that second scene, right? After you first start and you kind of have the intro, right, from the snow and the Fortress of Solitude, Superman flies away from the Fortress of Solitude. There's a scene of him flying, and then you see the big logo of the S of Superman, and everything sort of starts. That sequence of flying, it feels very generic, right? There's something there that's lacking. It doesn't have that grandness and ambitiousness to it. It just, it's a scene of flying. It's sort of Superman. It doesn't want to stay long there. It doesn't want you to keep, the whole thing about this is like it's TikTok. So you can't just see the scene, and you have to move on to the next part kind of quickly, right? That's the philosophy behind everything. So every single time you see it, just you look at the scene, catch the clever aspect of it, and move forward. So now we're in the next part. In the next part, it's the same process, right? You want to have a scene, you want to see how clever it is, and then you want to move up to the next one. In here, we have Superman fighting the Hammer of Boravia, and the action sequence, where he's trying to grab you, it's not interesting. Like, it's very shallow way, like, and it's crazy, right? Because we have so many films, right, throughout the years, so many action sequences, and everything that he does with Superman, right, it's like throw one punch, two punch, Superman gets spinned around and gets thrown into the floor. There's nothing grand about it in any sense of the way. There's not something you can say, wow, I feel Superman. Zero of that. And then, all right, then let's talk about the villain, right, that just attacked Superman, the Hammer of Boravia. Its design is like just a guy in a suit that seems like very almost like Juggernaut, but you can see its face. And it's a boring design, right? It's just a random character. It's like if you play a video game, you know how you have your regular bad guys, your henchmen that you kill kind of quickly, and maybe once in a while something bigger shows up and starts attacking you. That, it's not a real boss, but it's just a sort of a bigger, a manager sort of boss, right? Like something that's, supposed to be stronger. And you kind of beat him quickly, so that's it. That's the style of villain we get, right? It's not something interesting to even look at in any sense of the matter. And he's one of the main villains, right? Because he ends up becoming Ultraman. But that's basically what we get. And the fight scene that happens, the visual effects are pretty bad. At one point, you're looking at Superman's face, and you're like, "Wow, that was pretty bad. Why is his face so CGI as he's moving across the skies?" And all of this feels like it's been done in a green screen, right? There's no sense of there's no illusion of being lost within a film. You always know this is a CGI film because nothing of it kind of holds you down into a sense of reality. So the fight is going on, and wow, there's this moment, dude. Like, Lex Luthor is in Luthor Tower, right? And the scene is, it's not the best cinematography. It actually looks like you're in a TV show, in a TV show from the 2000s, right? And even back then, you didn't have the kind of quality that you have in TV shows nowadays. But this looked extremely badly done, the way it was shot and the whole look of it. But Lex Luthor is there, and he's talking to some bad guys, some random guys, and he's giving the commands to the villain, the Hammer of Boravia, of how to fight Superman. If he says 1A, he punches or whatever. And just think about that, man. This is the part that really struck at me. Like, this is the sort of film that really takes its audience like they're really, really dumb, or like just filled with like unintellectuality. Like, there's nothing interesting about that. You expect me to look at something like that, a scene like that, and be captured by it in any sense of the matter? That Lex Luthor saying 1A, and then the other villain does 1A, and that's the cleverness of it. That's how he controls the character. I'm meant to be consumed by that scene because he says that, and it takes place. It's such a small. It's something so unclever to me, so uncreative, and I'm meant to sit here and take that as something interesting, dude. When am I like I it's offensive for me to watch something like that, and to believe that everybody in the film studio, every producer, they all said, let's leave the scene like this. That is not something ridiculous that will be shown on film. It's not interesting in any sense of the matter. Comic books are filled with things that are interesting, and you're telling me that this is what you thought was clever to capture my attention? That Lex Luthor yells out a move and the clone sort of does it? Well, oh yeah, the Hammer of Arabia is a clone of Superman, wants to be an Ultraman. Pretty sure the people that have seen the movie, I guess, you guys know that. But you see, it's not something. It's just so dumb. It lacks it lacks any sort of artistic approach to it, any sort of philosophical identity, any sort of sophistication in itself. It's just something so unclever that you want me to watch and you want me to believe that it's something cool to look at. But this is what we are. This is what James Gunn thought was interesting, right? So then Superman fights the Hammer of Arabia. They grab him and they throw him down to the ground, down into the ground of Metropolis, and people surround him. And the bad guy flies away because I guess Superman couldn't beat himself. Superman was too weak. And while he's there, right, a lot of the people, one guy comes down to Superman. And he's like, Superman, I am helping you because of the way you helped me before. And, he's helping him pick him up from the ground, right? A random civilian. And it's such a in-your-face type of like way of speaking about things. It's sort of like trying to teach you, oh, this is what Superman does. People, it's so obvious and blatant of what he wants to tell you about the goodness that Superman has, that other people will do it. It's almost like feels so childish and like have you ever read a comic? Have you ever watched any of the other Superman films? Like, you don't have to show and tell me. It felt, I don't know, man. Like, there's nothing there for me to grab onto. It's just not interesting. It's just not interesting, like, thoughtfully. It's so shallow. And I think this is the main reason that James Gunn was very bad for this project, because Superman is not something simplistic. It's simplistic in the idea of goodness that we can all relate to, hope and everything. We all sort of understand that intuitively, right? When we think about all the best values in humanity, everybody that wrote Superman sort of understood what it meant. We all understood what he signifies, so we all kind of decided, it was like, okay, this is who Superman is, right? And that was very simply done, almost automatically within this human collectiveness. We all decided that that's Superman. So that, in that sense, is simple. But what it means to be good is something so complex, something so religious, something so righteous, something so big that you truly have to sit there and ponder and think about and question it from angles that might not be correct sometimes. That's the essence of when you have to describe how something good is. For James Gunn, he doesn't have that kind of thoughtful execution of ideas, so you're not expecting of that. Here it's like, we save a puppy and now you understand that Superman does good. Which, if you're a child, even you can't even tell that to a child, because most children already know that. Like, what are you doing here? But his vision of Superman is something that requires a little bit more honesty and truthfulness and earnestness. And here it just you can kind of feel that he doesn't have that. And then when it comes to cinematography and the look of the film, the feeling of the film, there's so much of it that is, it feels cheap, right? This is Superman. This is the first movie that you're going to have that's going to continue to move forward the DC universe. Why is your cinematography so bad? Why is the angle so bad? Why is the visuals so bad? Why is the way the fights are so uninterestingly boring? You don't capture a human being like, and it's your introduction as a film, right? like I said, the first part is it's the introduction, so I have to capture you fully. And at the beginning, when he was in the Fortress of Solitude, when he was with the snow, you kind of get a glimpse of something new, right? With the Fortress of Solitude and the robots and the feeling of the film. But he couldn't continue that in the next part of the film, right? And that happened all so quickly. And then you look at there was this moment where I'm looking at Lex Luthor, the Luthor Tower, right? And one of the second villains too, called the Engineer, which is this girl that has cyber nanos as her body type and is able to change and stuff. She comes into Luthor Tower, and now we're looking at the Luthor Tower with the bill, and I'm like, this looks horrendous. It's just a bad look to it. It's something that like it never hit me that James Gunn doesn't have that good visuals. I think sometimes maybe the cinematographer does a lot of the carry, but there's some stuff that is just so badly looking that I'm like, what are we doing here, right? And I've seen a lot of some of his movies, and you're able to produce some good looks, some good visually stunning capturing effects. But here it was just like it felt like like I said, like a TV show from the 2000s, right? When the budget wasn't there or CGI wasn't there, so they have to take shortcuts. But even then, those films still try to do as best of a look as they possibly could. And then you look back on them, it's like they're doing a lot better than they do now, right? They have a longer staying power. So that's basically the intro. I felt completely like almost offended by it, especially that part with with Lex Luthor calling out moves. Like I wanted to be like I just didn't want to watch it afterwards, but I went through the whole thing, so it is that. All right, we're gonna move to the next part, which is the main philosophy of Superman in this film, and we're gonna explore that for a bit. Okay, so the next part I want to talk about is basically the main philosophy of the film. Like we talked about the introduction and how that plays itself out, and you notice how the whole film kind of moves in a very TikTok kind of way, right? So everything kind of has to flow fast. You have to get a good, clever scene and then move on to the next one, right? And that, if you look at every single scene in this movie, you're gonna get that feeling, right? This is the scene where they're talking about this. This is the scene where there has to be some action here, and this is the next one, right? It's a TikTok sort of movie. But the philosophy in this, James Gunn realized that you need to have like a sort of depth to the movie, right? You have to have something that abstractly can hold it in and that you can talk about it so it can feel like something more. And his idea for this was that kindness is punk rock, if I recall. Kindness is punk rock. And what basically this means is like that Superman was supposed to be something sort of like that, right? That his kindness was something revolutionary to the environment at play. And this is something that Grant Morrison, the original, I think he got it from Grant Morrison, to be honest, because Grant Morrison said the same thing, that Superman was supposed to be that, right? So a kindness that was so aggressive and so out there, that was very punk rock. And I'm pretty sure that's where he got it from. And sure, I think that in itself is a very strong, like let's say, philosophy to follow throughout the film as something that's supposed to be there. Let's say if you deal with like chaos and order like you did in The Dark Knight and other ideas, right? You want to have this big abstracts so you can talk about them within the film. The thing is that the way that James Gunn does it, right? Because like I said, he's not a deep thinker and he's not an artist. He's somebody that wants to just show you like, this might look cool on film. This is sort of interesting and tells a story. But that depth, because it's so lacking, to get those ideas across can be very, very difficult. So in this case, for him, kindness is punk rock. He has to show you that kindness is punk rock, right? It's something like against a word that's just so mean and can be so cynical. Like you can have this kind of kindness that is gonna feel like so punk rock, right? So the biggest scene that I think this took form in was during the kaiju battle, right? Because when you see the kaiju fight, which is the big the monster that shows up in Metropolis, that's the part where I think I seen the most of what he's trying to tell in his way of what kindness should be punk rock. And as the scene starts, right, it starts very obvious, because a lot of these films, right, even every single scene is very obvious in this movie. That's one of the things that like, they're very uncreative scenes. It's like you have seen this scene in the Superman movie somewhere else, in a TV show, in a cartoon, in anything. It was just, it was very, very uncreative. So in this scene, right, there's this band that pulls over, and the band pulls over into the beach, and they have something inside a box, and there's two henchmen sent by Lex Luthor, and when they open the box, there's this little monster that walks himself out, right? This wiggly monster. And then and then one of the henchmen says something like, "Oh, he's so tiny," and then the other henchman says like, "Oh, he'll grow big." It's almost you understand the joke, right? That eventually he becomes the giant, the big monster. You don't know how. We don't. The movie exists within this comic book feeling and realism that sometimes doesn't make any sense, but you kind of let her slide because it's just the movie, right? And you don't want to be jaded by you don't. This is not the type of movie where you're gonna be like, all right, who pumps the air on the tires of the Batmobile, right? Because it's a stupid question. Sometimes things just happen just for the sense of a comic book feeling or whatever. So in this case, that little thing becomes the giant monster that's in Metropolis, has this big comically googly eyes, and somehow you're supposed to take it as a threat, right? That monster is, so it's a because it lives within the real world, material world of Metropolis. It's a danger because it could kill people, but also you have to be whimsical and kind of funny about it because the movie itself doesn't take itself seriously. So you lose a lot of the drama and you lose a lot of the feeling of like things matter in this universe, because nothing really matters in this Superman universe, because everything has a sort of jokiness to it. It's like almost very cartoonish, but at the same time, it wants to tell you that it has deeper values because Superman's getting angry about a certain political drama. The movie can never find it wants to play two roles and none of them hit well. And in this scene particularly, I think everything comes into play, that how none of this stuff works and everything just becomes really awkward. Like you have this giant monster in the middle of Metropolis, right, that can kill people, and they're trying to find a solution to stopping him, right? And in this moment, you have Superman, and you also have the Justice Gang, and the Justice Gang is like the Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific, right? And everybody at play in this feels inept. Superman feels inept. Nobody here feels like they're capable of being superheroes. I mean, they're all basically assholes. Even Superman, to some degree, can be taken as somebody that you don't trust, right? So the monster's stomping around the city and waggling its tail, and at one point, this dog is about to get crushed by the foot of the monster, but Superman comes in and saves the dog, right? And in there you can see the pattern of James Gunn, right? Because it's like the idea is that kindness is punk rock, right? So even the dog, right, something so little, he has to go there and save it, and Superman's saving a little dog because that's what he does. He saves the little guy. It feels like such a pandering sort of ideas and philosophies to something that we already know has more depth to it, and then you go back and regress all the knowledge that we have of Superman as a society into something so simplistic and lacking of any. It feels again almost offensive that you give me something so little to think about and to have a mind to look at in film. Like I know Superman can save a dog if he'll save any small little thing. And so it's like the scene happens, right? He saves the dog and it's fine, right? Let's say that the scene is fine. He does it again, right? And the second time there's a squirrel in trouble. So Superman, instead of getting he has to save the squirrel, right? He saves the squirrel again from the giant monster, picks the squirrel up and saves her. He does that again, right? And the idea is the same, right? That James Gunn's trying to show you that kindness is punk rock, even to the little guy, even from a dog to a tiny little squirrel. Like, I get it. You get me? It's not something like, what are we doing? It's just bad, right? It's just bad. Like, you don't want to judge it because you're saying, why would you say that saving a squirrel is bad? It's a nice, thoughtful message. We all know that it's something obvious. This is like somebody telling me that, you know what? Hitler is bad, guys, and I stand against Hitler. It's such a pandering little thing that is meaningless, right? You're trying to say something that it's so obviously and it's so obvious that it has no meaning to me, right? It's like saying being a criminal is bad. Like, you want a badge for that? You want a reward for that? For saying something so completely obvious? And this is what we're getting, because this is the way that he's trying to interpret kindness, by showing you the smallest little thing that Superman can save. But we know that Superman cares about that. We know that Superman would save a child or a baby, right? Like, he would sacrifice things to save the smallest of ideas. but the way he shows it to you, it's so in your face and so blatant that it makes you question the scene in itself, right? Like, who is this meant for, right? Like, it's an unintellectual interpretation of an idea in its most simplistic form, right? Like, what are we doing, man? And James Gunn wanted to keep it for that aspect, for that specific, thoughtful, he wanted to keep it specifically for that, so you can feel that saving the squirrel is just as important as a lot of other things. And we all know that. That's the thing. It's not something grand, and he's not saying. It's almost the same scene as when Lex Luthor says 1A and 1B. In his mind, he thinks he's cooking a really grand meal of ideas and thoughtfulness, while you're like, it's not that clever. It's not, we kind of get it, right? You're not. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect of artistic, of something artistic, right? Like, you think you're cooking, but you're not really cooking, right? We know this. Like, he does that, and then at one point, and the thing is, like, this sort of stuff, it doesn't make Superman into something that's rebelliously kind, right? Because what you have is something that looks inept, right? Because you have to compare the squirrel with every single person in Metropolis that you are not helping, that the monster is about to kill, right? That monster is a nuclear threat in the middle of the city. You have to get it out as quickly as possible, and none of this ridiculousness. And every single car and every single person that was around that is in danger, and somebody probably got killed as he was saving the squirrel, right? I mean, you can say this, are you measuring the life of a squirrel to a human being, But there's a lot of humans that are about to die in their cars. But, it makes the character look inept. It makes like somebody that you can't trust. And because this Superman is somebody that you innately cannot trust, is somebody that when you say kindness is punk rock, he sounds like somebody like naively dumb, and that you should not respect to do the good things, right? Because you can't trust him. If you can't trust this Superman, you can't trust in his kindness. And this is a Superman that since the beginning has gotten defeated, doesn't know how to deal with political events, and when he does, it's like he seems almost like a petulant child. At no point should you trust this Superman in any sense of the way. And here it is. It's like here's a scene where it's like you're supposed to trust a man with so much power that he could destroy the planet, and you can't trust him, right? And I think that was the biggest error of this Superman. And again, it made for a bunch of scenes where it's like there's so much at play that is wrong that you can kind of grasp or have a feel of it, right? All the scenes with Superman is like you don't trust that he's gonna win. And it's not that he couldn't win. Like you should have that as you always want to have that drama that Superman can be defeated. But it's the kind of drama where it's like you don't trust that he can win, not because of the environment of things at play, but just because he is inept at what he does. And it's not an ineptness that it's like sort of naive or filled with his goodness because he's a good human being, that sometimes kindness can be interpreted as, but it is because he truly feels like he can't get the work done. Or that his choices as a person is just like this. You cannot let this man make a choice, right? Because he's gonna go and save the squirrel instead of taking the kaiju monster, which should be very, very important. Like when you want to have those deep philosophical thoughts, right? You have to really come and like really think about them, right? You have to really truly think how you're gonna interpret that in film so it makes logical sense and like the people can perceive it and understand it. When the Joker put the drama, right, that the human being had to decide between a bunch of criminals and killing them or a bunch of people getting blown up. That's something very intellectual that took a lot of pieces of the film, a lot of execution, a lot of thought for it to work out perfectly. It's not just, you go save the squirrel because it shows you that you're kind. Like, we need more than that for something to be carried, and you need to be deeper and stronger for it to have a feeling. And Superman just doesn't have that, right? And it's hard to differentiate any of the superheroes and their moral dictations because they all feel like they'll be jerks, right? At one point, Superman is saying how he at one point, Superman is talking to Lois while there's this big monster terrorizing the city. And he's like, oh, don't worry about them. They're taking care of it. But I'm dealing with this, I'm talking to you, Lois Lane, in this deep moment. So it's like, the joke is that there's a monster flying over Metropolis, right? And the Justice Gang is taking care of it. And the joke, right? Because this is a joke scene. Like the joke is that, they'll take care of it. Don't worry. Even though it looks like in the background, it looks like such a chaos. And for you, it's just a joke. But if you're going to say something like that, right? If you're going to diminish threats, if you're going to make it something so comical, right? When you start saying stuff like kindness is punk rock, those things are not going to hit. Because it's not kind what you're doing at that moment. You're understanding that his very idea of who this Superman is somebody that doesn't understand kindness, doesn't understand sacrifice in itself, doesn't understand how any of this stuff should be done. It looks like somebody inept, right? If somebody's attacking Superman, you're gonna sit there and talk to Lois Lane about some other small problems that you have, some other problems, right? It seems ridiculous, and in that ridiculous, you lose all the gravity and gravitas that you have for a lot of these topics that you want to talk about. And I think James Gunn, like I said, he's not a deep thinker, so he doesn't think about this stuff as they're being progressed. He might have thought about it in the sense of like cleverness. Oh, this will be clever, like, right? Because he's good as a TikToker, right? Like a TikTok sort of filmmaker, where it's like he shows you something that's clever. I got you there, but he can't go deeper into that scene or that emotion or that effect that should be placed upon the subject. And you saw that within this, right? Like, how are you going to show kindness is punk rock when you have somebody that is inept, somebody that doesn't show any sort of kindness or what it means to be kind or how this thing work out or how all this thing works out. I think sometimes they're just words to be said, right? Like, I feel like when he said that kindness is punk rock, it's just like this sort of idea he has, but obviously he can bring it into fruition because the way he creates films is something more like edgy jokes and things like that. So that's where that philosophy ended. And a lot of the film kind of functions like that, right? Where you can take it seriously, and you're supposed to sometimes take it seriously. You're dealing with a geopolitical drama, right, between two nations. One of them meant to be Israel, the other one's meant to be Palestine and Gaza, and they are supposed to be that, right? That's the honest truth. Like, it's 100% meant to be that. And even the bad guy that hot girl kills is supposed to be the president of Israel called Netanyahu. You think that's kindness? Do you think that's kindness? Both of those nations are in a truly turmoil. Half of the world is turning on Israel. The other, Palestine, is about to lose its land, right? And you think it's kindness to interpret everything in this just simplistic, ridiculous way because you need the cleverness or the attention from like the subjects. That's not. It's just very shallow ways of thinking. It's a very, very shallow way of thinking. And then Hawk Girl ends up killing the president of Moravia, which is the representation of the president of Israel, right? Like, I'm going to tell you that it was because it really was. Like, when it's something so obvious and in your face, you kind of got to say what it is. And that's what it basically was. So, yeah, Hawk Girl grabs him and ends up killing the guy because he's supposed to be a bad president or a tyrant. And mind you, this Hawk Girl is this murderous Hawk Girl, like a cold-blood murderer, is the type of person that Superman is hanging around with and joking around with, and they're part of the Justice Gang, I guess. You get that, like, having these ideas and not be able to represent them materially into something good, it's a big problem. It's like you don't know what you're doing, right? You're saying these big, complex ideas, but you can't represent them, nor do you have an idea of how they would look represented on film. And I guess we'll leave it at that for that part. Because, yeah, I mean, I think this was the soul of the film, and this is where James Gunn himself just doesn't know what he's doing, dude. So you end up with something that it's just words. Saying kindness is punk rock. Cool, that's a great set of words to say, but you did nothing in the film to show that. And what you did show was that Superman is inept. Oh, also, one more thing, right? There was this line where Superman is talking to Mr. Terrific about the Caillou fight, and Superman goes like, isn't there a way we can take this monster and put him in a zoo, or put him somewhere? So the whole point is that you're not supposed to kill the giant monster that's about to destroy all of Metropolis with the people around it, but that we have to find a solution that's non-violent that can save him as well. You know, again, isn't that just ineptitude or ridiculousness while you're trying to cover it up with a sense of kindness? And I think this is something that afflicts modern society, to be honest, right? Like, you want to say something kind, but you have no idea how to properly execute that within the world, or what is necessary has to be done, right? But you just want to say something kind because people will agree that you said something kind. But in its actuality, you're just an idiot. They're probably making things worse than what it should be, and that's what Superman ends up being, right? Superman ends up being something that sounds naively stupid and irresponsible in that scene, and that's the philosophy for that. And okay, we'll end this part for now, and we'll head to the final section of what I want. Okay, gentlemen, and let's go over the final part of the discussion, which I'm just gonna tell you, like, I know I didn't talk much about, let's say, that the scenes, what it wants to be, the characters, and all this stuff, the cinematography as it went on, the story, the plot lines. To be honest, I'm just gonna tell you, just a bad film. Like, when I made 2 videos before this, and they was discussing more about those aspects, but I realized that it's better to talk about, like, the more important stuff. And I think the philosophy of the movies were more interesting. This movie is not a good film. It is by all means. I don't think I cared about it. I don't think anybody cares about it. To be honest, it didn't do that well in the movie theater. It's not doing well socially. The majority of people kind of were like, okay, it was consumable content. And that is what it was. It was just consumable content, but that you don't care about. And in that essence, the movie's a failure for a Superman film. You were supposed to do more than this. You were supposed to have something bigger, more interesting. And whoever chose James Gunn, they did it over the most shallow reason, which is you wanted to copy the Marvel universe. You wanted to have something comfy and something uninteresting. And guess what? The DC audience doesn't work like that. And the people that expect Superman don't work like that. They understand that Superman is more than that because it has like 80 years of storytelling binded into him. It's an entire enterprise. It's an entire idea taking form of humanity. You had to have done more and to be better at every aspect of it. And what you did here was something mediocre that repeated itself over and over. You gave us every scene felt almost like shock value of cleverness. It's like, look at this clever topic, let's look at the next one. Bro, at one point there was a black hole in this movie and they were in a different dimension. Then you're fighting Ultraman. There's some geopolitics to it. Nothing of that was cool or interesting. With so much, right? And I'm telling you, there's so much because in this film wasn't very long, but they stuffed so much into it just for you to like it. And none of that captured. Not a single thing. The fights with Ultraman, shallow and uninteresting. Did you not see Man of Steel and how that was done? You had Zod and Superman in the skies of Metropolis fighting. That was absolutely epic, and it's still unmatched to this day. It took The Matrix Reloaded, the fight with Neo and Smith, and made it into Superman and Zod, and it was grand. It was amazing. It was incredible. In here, you have Ultraman, who at one point kicks in the nuts Superman. Because he did, and this Superman is not even Superman. He's a character that just he's not strong at all like Superman. He's just probably a little bit stronger than Spider-Man. So he's not really Superman. You know, if you're going to pick Superman, it's because he has that capability to do all those things that are just amazing, right? But James Gunn didn't choose that path. Instead, he made a Superman that was really weak because he needed to humanize him, right? This is what James Gunn did, right? He wanted to humanize Superman so you would like him more, but in that essence, he took away everything that made Superman so cool, which is to be invincible, to be honest. That's what makes Superman cool. In here, he's fighting, he's getting defeated by characters that he shouldn't be losing. It looks kind of uninteresting. The fight sequences, there was one moment, dude, in the fight sequences when it looked sort of cool. In that moment, never replicated itself throughout the film. At no point. It was when Superman is just discovering Ultraman and they're fighting in the subway, and Ultraman kind of throws Superman and they're fighting and it's kind of fast. I was like, wow, this looks cool. That was the only moment that was cool in that film. After that, nothing was interesting. Absolutely nothing. Superman, the way he flies, it's never captivating, nor do you care. And fly is the most amazing thing of Superman. When you look back at the original movie, right, of Superman, you know what's the tagline? You'll believe a man can fly. In this movie, at no point do you care that a man can fly, nor do you believe it. You don't care because it's not interesting. It doesn't look amazing. It doesn't look cool. It looks like a CGI regular Marvel movie, right? And you don't care, and then you kind of don't believe it because it's all like very cinematographically bad. Every time Superman is fighting, looks really, really bad. There's this scene where Superman is fighting a bunch of Lex Luthor, an army of Lex Luthor henchmen or super soldiers, and they're flying in the sky. And the scene is like it doesn't have. It looks very bad, right? Like it's supposed to be Superman spins around with his laser beams and defeats all these villains, and it's like it feels so comic booky, right? But at the same time, when you bring things that are comic booky into this world, it just looks more wacky and uninteresting and not cool looking. That you end up with a scene that just looks, like what are we watching? So this is wackiness. Like it's not. What are we doing? Everything about this film was pretty bad, dude. Lois Lane was, I think the actors were the best part of it, and they did the best that they could, but the script was horrendous. Not an inch of dialogue do I remember. There was some dialogue that I remember just because of the excessiveness of it. Like when Superman is talking to Lex Luthor, he's screaming at him about, I think his life. He's like, oh, Lex Luthor, this is who I am. He's like, I am very human. It just felt very hammy and like so forced of drama and forcing philosophy in a film that doesn't admire anything of that. Oh, that was bad. It was just bad. The Justice Gang, Green Lantern, Mystical Terrific was sort of interesting, but everything else is just I can live without, dude. Like to be honest, this film was at the end of it, I was just like, I don't care about watching the next movie, and this was just a waste of my afternoon. It was terrible. Ultraman too, dude. Think about it. Do you think it's interesting that Ultraman is a clone of Superman? The most uninteresting possible idea for Ultraman. Ultraman could have been something that that Lex Luthor discovered in his different dimension, right? And he brought Ultraman here so he can stop the Superman and everything cool that comes with Ultraman because he's supposed to be the negative, the antimatter side of Superman. So when they touch with each other, they will kind of blow up everything or something cool, right? Or maybe a legion from a different world. All these different aspects that would have made Ultraman cool, right? No, he's just a basic random ass clone of Superman in this universe. Who cares about that idea? And it's a clone that doesn't even speak. Because if he spoke, then, Lex, James Gunn would have had to make that sort of interesting, and I guess he ran out of ideas. None of that. Lois Lane, she was beautiful. Again, I hated that she's a great actor, but this movie was terrible for her. Most of some scenes that he had with Clark Kent were sort of nice and interesting, but again, the dialogue was too forced and not there. A lot of the side characters, I don't care much about. I think there was Jimmy Olsen, there was some people in the Daily Bugle, but they'll just sort of fill their role. In some of the scenes, they don't matter. Like a lot of the stuff that you normally would talk about film, there's no reason to talk about a film because when you walk out of it, it's just like, I think the main discourse was the other stuff. So to end this, yeah, this movie was not good in any sense of the way. I mean, it's just very mediocre. You can watch it in an afternoon and start to be like, oh. But the other day, dude, I was actually more sad that it existed because it's like, wow, we really have such a bad Superman film for a character that I love so much. I guess we'll end it like that, fam. Like, I don't want to just keep attacking this film, but yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't interesting, and I don't recommend it. I think James Gunn was very bad at doing what he was supposed to do, and nobody should have gave him this to begin with. Nobody should have given him this movie to begin with, but here we are, fam. Thank you for everything, and GG's. We'll talk. I'll do another video some other time. I know I dragged this one long, but it's like I had a lot to say about this film, and I could legit go on for like 2 more hours criticizing how bad this film is. but I'm courting his show right now, so I don't like transgress into other territories. But yeah, GG's fam.